Choice Hotels get you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. Like these road trippers making waffles and eating fresh fruit in their natural habitat. The breakfast area at a Comfort Inn. I just love seeing a vacation maximized in the wild. Check into more. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
Have you heard of Olivia, the travel company for lesbians and LGBTQ+ women? You know what they say. Life is short and the world is wide. And when you're a lesbian or LGBTQ+ woman, you want to be able to go on vacation, have some fun, and be yourself. Olivia Travel creates full takeovers of their cruise, resort, riverboat, and adventure vacations, so you can relax and be completely yourself. Olivia also provides the entertainment, bringing comedians and musicians from within our community. Traveling by yourself? No problem. Olivia has a robust solos program so you can travel independently, together. Single, coupled, or in a group, you'll meet amazing LGBTQ+ women who come from all walks of life yet have so much in common. Join the thousands of Olivians who travel to bucket list destinations all over the world. It's life-changing to be in the majority on your own vacation. Discover Olivia for yourself at olivia.com today. Welcome back to Cruising. This is Sarah Gabrielli, and we kind of have a rock star on the pod today, which is legendary singer and activist Holly Near. She's an early pioneer of women's music, more specifically lesbian feminist music. And she's going to clarify what all of that means because, unfortunately, I do feel that the concept and the history and all of the community that came with women's music back in the day has been relatively lost on the younger generation of queers, myself included, until recently. I've mentioned this on the pod before, but on my way to Women's Week in P-Town, which is where I met Holly, I had looked up every performer on the event schedule to figure out who had a good story to tell and, to be honest, who had a lot of followers. I hope Holly doesn't mind me airing out that she has a very normal person amount of Instagram followers in a way that did not lead me to believe that she was a rock star in her own right. I've already told part of this story, but at the first Herstory panel where I met Kristen Becker and spoke a bit about cruising, a woman came up to me afterwards and gave me a flyer to her show. And I think she said something like, "I hope you'll come." And I was flattered and politely was like, "Oh, yes, I'd love to. Thank you so much," not really knowing who she was. And as she walked away, people around me were like squeezing my arm and whispering, "Do you know who that is? That's Holly Near. You have to go. You have to go." So that was when I first started to understand who Holly Near really is and what she means to the lesbian community that grew up on her music. Holly actually started her career in film as a teenager. In 1969, she landed a few roles on shows like The Partridge Family and All in the Family. And then in 1970, she got cast in the original Broadway production of Hair. Then, in 1971, she joins Jane Fonda's Free the Army tour, an anti-Vietnam roadshow, which their 8-person cast, including Holly, Jane, and a young Donald Sutherland, traveled overseas to perform for the troops. Once Holly gets back to the States, she starts producing radical anti-war music, which eventually lands her in the world of women's music. She starts touring with some of the greats like Meg Christian, Chris Williamson, and Margie Adams. Holly and Meg Christian get together for a few years, and she publicly comes out as a lesbian at the first ever Michigan Women's Music Festival in 1976. Unfortunately, I am summarizing all of this now because you don't actually get unlimited time to ask famous people their entire life stories, as I always aim to do. Despite her Instagram follower count, Holly is extremely famous, which was very much a lesson for me in the relative irrelevance of a social media following in the grand scheme of history. I call Holly a rock star not because of her style of music, which is very folk, but because of the scale of adoring lesbian and women fans that she has to her name. For example, everywhere she went in P-Town, women would come up to her and gush. We had arranged our interview for the morning of the P-Town Dyke March and had planned to walk over to the rally together afterwards, at which we had both been asked to speak. So I am actually insanely nervous during this entire conversation, not even because of Holly, but because of my impending speech and all of the imposter syndrome that was coming with that. But it was really, really helpful and special walking over there with Holly, her soothing my nerves and asking me about cruising, stopping every few minutes to share a heartfelt moment with one of her adoring fans. I had been very clear about how nervous I was, and at the rally, she gestured for me to stand by her and squeezed my arm as she left the crowd after her own speech. The kind of speech she's given thousands of times, by the way, to crowds hundreds of times as large. And then on my turn, as I spoke about lesbian bars and queer community, I noticed that Holly had lingered by a big tree on the other side of the lawn to listen. I think it went well, like whatever, we don't have to get into it, but that was the last I saw of Holly Near. By the time the next speaker had started, the figure by the tree was gone. And I guess I just hope that that whole afternoon made her feel good about the next generation of lesbian storytellers. But enough about me. Let's get to Holly.
I was raised in Northern California on a cattle ranch. My parents met during World War II, and they worked in an airplane factory making the bombers that were used. My mom was an electrician, and my dad had polio, so he wasn't a soldier in the war, and he would drive around a little cart and deliver the parts to the women who would then put the parts onto the bombers. They were kind of like what we think of as the Rosie the Riveters. So he would flirt with my mom when he was delivering the parts, and that's how they met. And they got involved in the unions, and then eventually moved north to a little town called Potter Valley. And me and my 3 other siblings were raised there in small town life. But my parents loved records. And so they would order them from catalogs that they would get. And we had a very diverse experience with music. Everything from opera to musical theater to jazz to folk music. And we didn't have television, and we were a long way away from neighbors. So we would spend the evenings entertaining each other. There were lots. It was a piano and some guitars and mandolin and ukuleles. And so we grew up with self-made music and theater and dance, just making it up.
You were playing the instruments, or were those on the records?
Those instruments were on the records, but we were also playing them. My mom played some piano. My dad played the harmonica. When children are given the space to entertain themselves, it's a sad thing, I think, that's going on now, even though multimedia and the internet has hooked up people around the world who would never, for example, a gay child who's out in the middle of nowhere can go online and find a family.
Right.
And that's good. The part that's not so good is when people are on their cell phones or in front of their laptops or whatever their medium is, to stop being with each other in real time and to make up their own songs and their own dances and not necessarily feel like you have to dance like Beyonce in order to be a dancer, you know? So if you took all of that major influence away, that's how we grew up.
Had you been politicized? Was that something that was like centered in your life?
Yeah, because of whom our parents were. I wasn't political, like going out into the world and being politicized, but out on the ranch, since we were far away from people and didn't have a television, my politics were really based on their belief system, which was critical of imperialism, critical of capitalism, critical of racism. That's just who they were. I know.
I mean, that's why you are the person that you are. That's amazing.
And all us kids acted that out differently as we became grown-ups. But like we'd be sitting around the table and they would talk about the Rosenbergs and the execution of the Rosenbergs.
Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were a married couple and the first American civilians to be executed for espionage, basically for helping provide classified information to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Their sentencing was met with opposition around the world, but nevertheless, they both went to the electric chair in 1953.
They got magazines, this thing called IF Stone Weekly that would come in the mailbox every week and had political ideas in it. Then when I was 13, we got a television.
Oh, that's a game changer.
Yeah. But what was the really big changer, aside from getting to see the Dean Martin show and Judy Garland and all these entertainers, what was really startling was to see the civil rights movement. Even though we were raised to not use the N-word and to listen to a lot of Black music, and we were raised with a lot of consciousness of opposing racism, to see the police, the Jim Crow down in the South, with hoses spraying Black people and pulling people out of who were sitting down for the first time at the cafeterias, and to see that was very influential, very kind of jaw-dropping for me.
Yeah. What year was that when you got the TV?
1964.
Okay, wow. Isn't there a story of like a sort of silent protest when you were in Hair, something like that?
Yes.
Was that kind of your first action in a way?
When I was in Hair, the students at Kent State were killed by the National Guard. And the students were protesting the U.S. invasion into Cambodia. And so they fired into the crowd and killed people.
So crazy.
Yeah, really crazy. And then later on the campus at Jackson State, Black people were killed. That story gets told less than the Kent State.
Do you want to tell it, or do you know
I don't
it?
know too much about it other than it was similar in terms of protesting on campus and the firing into. And that was happening on campuses actually all over the country, but Kent State became sort of a central point. So I was in Hair when that Kent State, the students were killed, and there were people in the cast who were much more informed than me. I was very young, and they came to work into the dressing rooms and said the shooting had happened and that Hair was an anti-war play, and the leads said, we're going to stop at one point and make reference to this because we feel like it's important to keep this show real as opposed to just a Broadway show. It's against all the equity union rules, whatever, to mess with the show to stop it. So they did a vote and everybody voted to do it. And I abstained because I didn't really know what the issues were. So they did stop. And so watching that, realizing that people had the power to make that kind of a decision and the courage it took to make that decision, that was an early example for me of what people could do and what artists could do.
They stopped in the middle of.
We just all on stage and stopped the show and said, the two leads said, we want to acknowledge the fact that these students have been killed at Kent State and while they were protesting the war. And this is an anti-war show.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there a big response to it?
No, I don't remember. I don't remember. I do remember being when I was in college. I went 1 year to college, not even quite the whole year, at UCLA. And Nina Simone came and did a concert at Royce Hall. And I remember going to that because I'd heard her records at the farm.
Yeah.
Nina Simone was the first, well, one of two. Janis Joplin and also Nina Simone were the two singers who I saw express rage through their music. My family wasn't the kind that got mad out loud. If you got mad, you excused yourself from the table. Very white.
Okay.
Protestant behavior. And Nina Simone she did the song Mississippi Goddamn.
Picket lines, school boycotts. They try to say it's a communist plot. All I want is equality for my sister, my brother, my people, and me.
It is profoundly clear. And her voice has a rage in it that I found, I don't know if I want to say exciting, but liberating in a way, that in the same way that I saw the actors on Hair, that you could take control and have power over a situation and influence it. I saw that she was able to pass on to her audience a shared emotion that was very honest and very raw. And Janis Joplin did that too. She was not a pretty girl. And I'd been raised sort of as a pretty girl. And I looked like the all-American girl.
Totally. So you had to like break down that sort of sense of self and like the value that you put on that.
And that even if I was a pretty girl and very dominant culture looking, that I could actually use that I could go to places where I looked safe and friendly and could actually speak a kind of radical truth out of this body and this face.
I was going to mention something like that too, because it's honestly striking looking at your younger self, like how innocent.
Yep.
Damn, there's so much going on with that woman. And she looks like a girl from the Partridge Family, basically.
She sure does. But to have a woman who looked like me sing a song called No More Genocide in My Name. No more genocide in my name. Oh, why are history books so full of lies? It had its own impact in a way that I started to understand how I could work with that.
How did you go from hair and sort of like the acting world to then the tour?
I had met a dancer choreographer at UCLA, and when I came back from doing hair, he and I had lunch, and we're talking about wishing there were more ways to express our ideologies through our art, because I was talking about the very thing we're talking now about how do we do that. And he said, by the way, I understand that they're auditioning for someone to go on this FTA tour. And FTA stood for Free the Army. In the military PR, it stands for Fun, Travel, and Adventure. It's how they try to induct people into the military.
Oh, so it's the same acronym.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so Jane had taken that. At any rate, he said, it's leaving soon. Someone had to drop out. And if you should go over and check it out. So I did. I arrived at this house and everybody was stuffing envelopes and ordering long underwear for the trip, all in the middle of it. And they said, just sit here. Maybe you can help us collate. Jane will be ready to see you in a little while.
Were you in New York at this point?
California.
Okay.
Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd come back to do a film, I think, from New York. And so I stuffed envelopes until Jane came in and said, everybody, we're doing lunch break and I'll be seeing people while we're doing that. She invited me and she said, can you dance? And I did sort of a little dance audition.
You danced in front of her?
Yeah.
What did you do? Like, what kind of dance
I
could
kind
you
of
even
joked.
do?
I sort of did a nothing could be finer sort of dance,
Which is
back
probably
and
what you wanted to see.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
can you move? Do
Yeah.
you stumble? Are you? And I danced absolutely, I'd taken a lot of dance and I was on time and I was fun and my body worked. And she said, can you read this little skit? So I read that and she saw that I could act. And she said, okay, the last thing is, can you sing? And I sang and her jaw dropped. She said, okay.
Sing?
And she said, can you be ready to go?
Oh my God.
Do you have a passport?
So can you describe in as much detail as possible what you all were doing on the tour and kind of the concept of it all?
For me, it was every moment was startling because I was so young.
You were
I think I was
21,
21,
right? I think,
yeah.
Youngest on the tour.
Youngest on the tour. There were 4 men and 4 women. There were 4 people of color and 4 white people. For 1971, I find that to be extraordinarily conscious on the part of the producers. And the sketches and songs that we were doing and the poems were all meant to be the opposite of the Bob Hope show. That we weren't there to say right on war. We weren't parading scantily dressed women on the stage.
Because Bob Hope was very well known for doing this kind of
It was
tour.
his territory.
Yeah.
We were entering into somebody's territory that nobody in the government wanted us to do.
How did they even let you guys come and do this and let everyone gather? And that's what blows my mind.
I know. I think it was one of the most radical things that happened in its time. And it's not well known even among the people who were in the anti-war movement. But the soldiers were coming back and starting coffee houses for returning soldiers who were also meeting up with new soldiers to say, do anything you can to not go to Vietnam. It's hell over there. And they were saying, why are we going into these villages and killing predominantly women, children, old people, Vietnamese, who have never done anything to hurt us? What is that about? So there were actually stories of men who were the ones that went to battle at the time, saying to their commanding officers when they were told, we're going to go into this village tomorrow, saying, well, actually, we're not. The commanding officer would say, well, I'm going to write you up for insubordination. And they'd said, well, unless your tent blows up. And that's how serious it got. It was called fragging.
Fragging, to be more specific, is the deliberate killing of one soldier by another soldier, typically by throwing a fragmentation grenade into their tent, which is how it gets its name. In Vietnam, this would be done to superior officers who were deemed dangerous or incompetent.
And the men would just say, I'm not going to die for this. I'm not dying for this. And a lot of them, the leadership of it were Black men who said, these are people of color. What are we doing? And they were spending a lot of their time reading Black theory, communist theory, leftist theory. I don't know how they got these books, but they did. And they were educating themselves about the military-industrial complex, the relationship of money to weapons, to corporations, to war. And they just didn't want to do it anymore. So sometimes they sat there for like 9 months, not doing anything. So these stories, some of the men who came back would join up with these coffee houses that soldiers against the war. And they were writing material, stories of their life and their work. And it's from those writings that the people who are putting this FTA show together made the sketches based on soldiers' writings. We didn't make it up. It's all coming from them. So we raised money to pay for it, and local people who were indigenous to each of those places that didn't want military bases there. And that was part of their work as revolutionaries in each of those countries, was to try to stop the militarism. And then there were organizers from the United States who went in and helped figure out where these shows were going to take place and where they get sound people. They advanced the tour. We didn't have anybody's permission. We just all had our own personal passports.
Yeah, so then you're in these areas and the soldiers are able to just kind of gather to see
the locals,
show.
Both let's say in the Philippines, the Filipino organizers as well as the advanced people from the United States who went, they coordinated flyers on the bases and handed them out at commissaries and got the word out really hand to hand to hand. It's not like they could go on television and say, this tour's coming. Jane Fonda is a really famous person. They don't get that much entertainment. There were some people who said to us, you're not going to get any big crowds. We would set up our own stage out in a field. Everybody, the performers as well, had a job to do. Thousands of soldiers came. Thousands. And when the military started to see this enthusiasm, they actually were telling soldiers that it was going to be over at this other place.
Oh.
To divert them. And we found that out and we waited for them. People went over and said, no, come over here. Right? And there was also a ship in the Philippines, in the Subic Bay. They kept the soldiers, wouldn't let them off until we left. Wouldn't let them off the boats.
I mean, it's
That's how
amazing
impactful.
that you were, I was just going to say that you had such a big impact like that. What was it like for you personally? I know it must have changed your whole perspective.
Well, it infused my perspective because I grew up being opposed to war. When I thought of war, I thought of soldiers as bad. They were the ones doing the killing. Turns out they were 18-year-old boys just like me. Some of them were poor. Some of them were drafted. Some of them were bored. Some of them were intensely patriotic. They all went in for lots of different reasons, and including some that went to Canada instead of going into the military. So Nixon did not want anybody to know that there was distress inside the military. That would have been really bad. So I'm jumping around a little bit, but when we did this tour, we filmed it. And then a film was made and it aired in New York City at a theater. I think it aired once and then it was confiscated.
So is it completely lost?
Nope. They found it later. It exists. It was on Netflix. I don't know if it still is. It's called FTA.
Okay.
And there's another film that was made that's a really good companion piece for it called Sir, No Sir. Which is about No Sir. Yeah. All about the soldiers' resistance, more about the resistance in the military than the actual FTA tour. And they're both really good. And you can play those things for people who thought they were part of the anti-war movement and they know nothing about it. It was so shut down. And then, of course, the big challenge was how to completely make Jane Fonda an enemy. that she was this powerful, beautiful, well-spoken, influential person, and they had to make sure that she was demonized.
How did they do that?
She went to Vietnam, and she went by herself, which she shouldn't have done. She didn't think it was a problem because she travels a lot and goes to different places. But they actually got a photo of her standing next to a U.S. plane that had been brought down by the Vietnamese. And it made it look like she was a traitor. And they go, okay, that's how we'll get her. And they called her Hanoi Jane. And they used that to say that while our soldiers were dying, she was celebrating with the Vietnamese about bringing down the aircraft. And that stayed with her for a long time. Took a long time to get to the other side of that. But I don't know how she does it. I mean, she has the most extraordinary capacity to keep going under duress.
I mean, she has really clear priorities, and that's gotten her far, I guess.
Yep. She ended up spending a lot of time talking to soldiers, talking to the families of soldiers. But here's the thing. Let's say you're raised in a patriotic family, think that God is on our side, U.S., right or wrong. And your son goes to Vietnam and is killed. Then you see this beautiful movie star saying that the war is bad. If the war was bad, what did their son die for? You know, it's an unimaginable transition to make. It's very, very difficult to know how to deal with those feelings. So that's what was going on at the time. And Nixon would say, oh, the anti-war people hate the soldiers. But it wasn't really that way. It was more wanting to protect them. Say, we don't want to send our boys to do this, nor do we want to kill the Vietnamese. It's the same mentality where you have to look at what's happening in the Middle East or in any of the other places where there's war. These leaders should be locked up in a stadium and say, you work it out. You work it out amongst each other, because you're not going to kill 40,000 children in the process of coming to a conclusion. I just say I'm opposed to male leadership using us as their cannon fodder.
100%.
I don't care what the you believe in, you know, you can't do this.
I have to not think about the actual specific men that can't deal with their own conflict. It's so horrible.
And right now, Netanyahu is the poster child for horrible. But we also have to say that poster child is being funded by the United States and our tax money, as were all the dictatorships in Central and Latin America. So it's impossible to separate oneself from it. No matter what side we're on, we as taxpayers continue to fund the military-industrial complex.
And what do you do?
We can influence each other. People actually are capable of creating change. I mean, there used to be smoking on airplanes. Now there's not. Organizers did that.
I know.
We as citizens have the capacity to change this, but it's very hard to get a whole nation mobilized around this, because a lot of people make a living off the military, and a lot of money is made for corporations from the sales of weapons. And also the United States, led by Kissinger back at the time, did not want there to be new young democracies growing up in Central and Latin America. They wanted dictatorships so that we as a nation, as a corporate-driven nation, would continue to have control over those countries and their resources, the fruits and the vegetables and the other things that were made in Central and Latin America. It's horrific once one starts to really learn about the dangers of capitalism and imperialism on.
As soon as you go below surface level, it's scary.
Yeah. It's overwhelming. And yet there's really good and wonderful things that go on in spite of it. You know, like when I did a concert in Sacramento out in California, I remember a woman saying to me, she wrote me a letter, and she said, I came to the concert with a scarf on and dark glasses and an overcoat because I'm in the military just north of here at the Air Force Base. And I didn't want to be found out. But I heard there were some lesbian songs being sung, and I wanted to. She walked into this theater, 90% women and probably 80% lesbians. And she was just overwhelmed. But she said what really got to her, in addition, were the anti-war songs I sang. And she went back to her base and she filed for conscientious ejector. I know.
That's amazing.
I know. We are
And there
so
you go.
ready as human beings to do the right thing. One of the things that artists can do is not preach or lecture to the audience. They're smart. Is simply put forward the doors. These doors and windows are open. You can choose to walk through them or not walk through them. One story, I'm working on a book. And so these stories are very prevalent in my head.
Oh, that's great for me.
I don't remember what state it was, but these elderly people asked to come backstage. And all I remember about them is that they seemed very cold and bundled up. They sat down on the couch and they said, we just wanted to tell you that we were about to disown our daughter because we heard she'd gone to San Francisco and that she was a lesbian. And he explained that his understanding of what that was came from when he was in the military many, many years ago. They had looked at magazines, porn magazines, where there were two women having sex with each other with dildos and hoses and everything, but for the pleasure of men. But that's what he thought a lesbian was. And it horrified him that his daughter was doing this.
Okay.
Right? His daughter said to him, before you disown me, will you go to this Holly Near concert? And they did. And can you imagine them coming out, how much they loved their daughter, that they would come to something that they thought was going to be a porn show. And they came because she asked them to, which I just find so moving. And they got there and they walked in and there were hundreds of polished, well-dressed, happy lesbians all singing along together. And they realized they had completely misunderstood why she was in San Francisco and what she was doing. And they came back to tell me to thank me for the fact that they were not going to disown their daughter and that she was probably having a beautiful life.
Have you heard of Olivia, the travel company for lesbians and LGBTQ plus women? You know what they say. Life is short and the world is wide. And when you're a lesbian or LGBTQ plus woman, you want to be able to go on vacation, have some fun, and be yourself. Olivia Travel creates full takeovers of their cruise, resort, riverboat, and adventure vacations, so you can relax and be completely yourself. Olivia also provides the entertainment, bringing comedians and musicians from within our community. Traveling by yourself? No problem. Olivia has a robust solos program so you can travel independently, together. Single, coupled, or in a group, you'll meet amazing LGBTQ plus women who come from all walks of life yet have so much in common. Join the thousands of Olivians who travel to bucket list destinations all over the world. It's life-changing to be in the majority on your own vacation. Discover Olivia for yourself at olivia.com today.
If you've ever shopped online, and let's face it, who hasn't? Chances are you've bought something from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes things easier, and not just for shoppers. They make it easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. It gives you a leg up from day dot with hundreds of beautiful ready-to-go templates to express your brand style so you can get up and running fast. You can tackle your important tasks, from inventory to payments to analytics and more, all in one place. You can also spread your brand's word with built-in marketing and email tools built for you to find and keep new customers. And remember that iconic purple Shop Pay button that's used by millions of businesses around the world? It's why Shopify has the best converting checkout on the planet. Your customers already know and love it. If you want to see less carts being abandoned, it's time for you to head over to Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. Shopify.com/realm.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
All right, listen up. The only gift that any dad wants on Father's Day is Goldbelly. Goldbelly ships the most iconic foods from the best restaurants across the country straight to his door for free. Let him kick back and chow down on award-winning barbecue from Texas, epic deep dish pizza from Chicago, or colossal pastrami sandwiches from New York. Make Dad feel like an absolute legend this Father's Day and go to goldbelly.com to get 20% off your first order with promo code DAD. That's 20% off at goldbelly.com, code DAD.
Hank's the family fixer, always with his tool belt. But living with prostate cancer, he needed help. He asked his doctor about Xtandi enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit xtandi.com.
I started my own record company in 1972. By the time I was done doing these various anti-war things and writing those songs, it became clear that the music industry wasn't going to be my home.
Yeah. So did you try to make it mainstream? What happened?
I did. Well, I just they would say we like your voice, but you can't sing those lyrics. Or another one said you can't really be a pop star. There's not enough element of submission in your voice.
So
because I know
Yeah.
because I wasn't a Janis. I didn't have a screamy voice.
Right.
I didn't have a rock voice.
I mean, you were the all-American girl.
I was the all-American girl. So I had to be singing songs, love songs, and closeted songs. So I said, well, I'll start my own record company. And I did. And it went on for 18, 20 years, something like that.
So I know it was out of your parents' house.
Yeah.
How did you create this record company?
Well, at first it was just a label because you had to have a label in the middle of a record. It wasn't like we were starting a record company. We just legally had to have that thing in the middle of the record. And so we did that. And I filed for the license that I would need it. And my dad's real estate company was called Redwood Realty. So I called the record label Redwood Records. And I thought I'd just do this one recording. My parents said they were fine to be the ones to ship it out so that as I was traveling, I could tell people, if you want to get my record, you can write to here and my mom will send you the record.
When you say we, like what kind of team did you have with you?
Me. Hello. Me, my mom and dad, and Jeff Langley, who was my pianist at the time, was supportive and advisory, and he was helping me produce and make the early records. But at some point, I started meeting feminists and lesbians who were doing what became women's music. And I said to Jeff, I think I want to work with some women to understand this. And he said, well, the timing's perfect because I've been putting off going to Juilliard. And I went off to work with Mary Watkins, was a pianist, and Adrienne Torf, different women who were slowly kind of finding their way towards these women who were making music together. And there was an event down in Los Angeles, a fundraiser for the Women's Building. And so they had Lily Tomlin, Meg Christian, Chris Williamson, Margie Adam, and they had a really big hall. And they decided that maybe they needed to have invite me because I had the left would come, and that would be more money that would come in, more tickets sold.
And at this point, your songs are pretty much all anti-war and kind of peace songs. Okay.
Well, there were some early women's songs from women's point of view, but they were, for example, one that was in my very first record was "It's More Important to Me," which was "It's more important to me that we be friends than we fight over a man." That was sort of early feminist writing from my point of view. There was a song called "You've Got Me Flying," which was my relationship with my sister. There was a song about women in prison called Sister Woman Sister. There was a handful of other songs that were, I would call them woman identified, not lesbian music or feminist music, but woman identified, coming from a woman's point of view. And then I met these other women at this big benefit, and I liked them and I thought they were really good. And there was this woman, Marianne Schneller, who said, I'd like to take some of what this show was at the Women's Building and do a 7-city tour in California. So she called it Women on Wheels. And it was Margie, Adam, Chris Williamson, Meg Christian, and me. And thousands of people came. It was really kind of kicked it off big time in California.
Can you sort of explain the concept of women's music for someone that might not? I mean, it's relatively self-explanatory, but
I think Meg Christian coined the phrase women's music, but she would have liked to say it was lesbian music. And even more so, she would have liked to said it was lesbian feminist music. I think she wanted to make room for women who hadn't come to that yet to be able to reach the music.
It makes sense. I think it's a good...
Kept it vague. And so even to this day, women's music is in many ways lesbian feminist music with some brave ally and feminist women around the edges who have supported this music. And it turned out that there was a huge need for it. All of a sudden, there were songs being written that were much more specifically about lesbian and lesbian feminist lives. And then they started wanting to present it in a more woman-identified fashion, so that they were thinking about ticket price and childcare and who is going to be where are the women engineers? There was one. Chris Williamson found Joan Lowe up in the Northwest. We didn't know any other women engineers. And then we were all standing around. It wasn't digital. So we were all moving the dials to try to do the mix. It was very collective and learning experience for all of us. We formed record companies. I already had Redwood Records, and then Olivia started theirs. And Margie Adam had I think it was Pleiades Records. Alex Dopkin had her own record company back in New York. We put out books. I think both Olivia and Redwood Records, my record company, put out manuals about how to produce a concert. And women just who wanted the music, and I don't know how to do this, but they'd follow the book about how to do it. And they'd get a hall, oftentimes a Unitarian church or a multi-purpose hall in a hotel. I think Meg, at some point, when she and Ginny Burson, who was her partner, Ginny has a great book out about, I think it's called For the Record, about the birth of women's music. But they would drive along from town to town, and sometimes just in living rooms with a light with a lampshade next to her, so that she could be seen by people sitting in the living room. It was very, very tiny. And then all of a sudden it got really big, and we were all playing at Carnegie Hall.
Wow. And it's all without the backing of major labels or anything. It's all self-produced. It's so amazing.
And what was amazing is that if you were going to put out a record, you needed a distributor, and then you needed someone to walk them into the record stores, and then you needed someone to produce the concert. And then you needed someone to advertise the concert. And then you started to understand what all the pieces were. And women just stepped up and filled the jobs.
Yeah. And you feel like it became like sort of entirely women run in that way.
It was. And
That's
by
awesome.
intention.
Yeah.
It got out for a while that it was anti-man.
Right. I was going to ask you about the every night there would be a women-only show and then a mixed show on
For the
tour.
Women on Wheels tour in California, we did two, open to the community and a women-only. There's a different experience when the room is filled with all women and predominantly lesbian feminist women. And so I think that that experience was something the producers wanted to provide for these communities. Because it's California. They were ready for that. I don't know if they would have been ready in Idaho. You'd have to talk to somebody from Idaho. But Oakland became a place where if musicians came to California, they ended up predominantly in Northern California. In the way that gay men went to the Castro, women came to Oakland. And so there was a pretty vibrant music scene in Northern California and in Oakland. And I think one might be able to say it was vibrant in San Francisco, but the reason I chose to call it Oakland when I curated a website about some of this Northern California women's music, and I planted it in Oakland because there was more of a working class and community-based organizing there in some way. And Linda Tillery lived there. And Linda Tillery was African-American, is an African-American singer-songwriter who had worked in a lot of the kind of famous Northern California male-driven bands. She was like the singer, the girl singer that got hired. And she was really ready to take a leadership role. I don't know if she'd even had thought it through or not, but when it was put in front of her, she grabbed it. She produced the B.B. Caroch record she never produced before. She was a drummer, so she was being asked to play drums. She was a singer-songwriter, and then she started working with Olivia Records, and they put out her work.
I think I'd like to get to know you in a special kind of a womanly way.
Mary Watkins showed up from the East Coast, and I started touring with her. African-American, classically trained jazz pianist who was just tired of being treated poorly in the music business. It's not that there weren't conflicts. My gosh, there were conflicts. We hurt each other's feelings all the time, as women are so capable of doing. But it was very nice not to have to fit into a male fantasy of what you were supposed to look like. Mary felt that she had to dress a certain way and behave a certain way and be in the closet and you can hear her talking about it herself in this, it's called becauseofasong.com. And there's like 23 or 26 interviews.
We're going to link to Holly's website, becauseofasong.com, in the show notes for anyone wanting to learn more about the history of women's music and the women who pioneered it. Holly's curated archival music and photos and interviews that she herself has conducted with some of the greats of women's music.
There's a section about sign language. My older sister worked with the National Theater of the Deaf as the hearing actor. And she came home one day and she said, "Would you like to see one of your songs?" And and she signed for me You've Got Me Flying, which I had written about her.
You would run and dance across the field in hay.
And it was so beautiful. And I asked her on stage to come and do it, and people fell in love with it right away. And then Susan Freundlich, who was working in deaf services in Boston, said, "You can't just sign one song, because then that's just for hearing people. You want deaf people to come, you have to sign the whole concert." Yeah. So at great cost and energy, Susan Freundlich came on tour with me for many years. And I think it was important, one, because deaf lesbians didn't have access to lesbian culture the way we did because they didn't have access to the music.
Right.
The music was such a big part of that. And Susan had a deaf friend who pointed at a record once, I think it was Chris Williamson's record, and said, "What is it you're all so excited about?" So Susan sat down and signed the whole record for her.
And then she got it.
So we did that for many, many years. And it's very hard to know who to say first and why and all of that. But I really do think because Timothy brought that to me and I took it to Susan and we took it to the audience, that prior to that, there really hadn't been the signing of the news.
Really? Hard to say, but that is pretty groundbreaking.
I think it was pretty groundbreaking.
Wow.
It became more commonplace. A lot of people fell in love with the language from my audience and went on to learn sign language and go into deaf services, working in hospitals and law and the various places where interpreters are needed.
That's amazing.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah. I think I interrupted you when you were starting to say the music kind of got this reputation as man-hating in a way. Can you kind of talk about that conflict and you moving into this from the anti-war movement?
Mm-hmm. I think in the early 70s and mid-70s, the progressive center and left had not dealt with sexism. And Gloria Steinem talks about this, how she and many women would have stayed part of the bigger anti-war movement, but they were constantly being sent to do the typing and bring the coffee and not take leadership roles and things like that. And I think there was a time where women just moved away from that because they couldn't get their work done if they were being put in that position. So one could go back and say, instead of that choosing to do women-only work was man-hating, you could go earlier than that and say, in the pre-consciousness left, it was woman-hating.
I mean, yes. And also it's just so obvious. It's like, how many male-only spaces have there been throughout history? And you really can't handle this evening of one woman-only show. It's so commonplace for men to have that kind of space.
And it works also with white people where they're happy to not have Black people in their midst, but if they are told they're not welcome, they would want to start another civil war around it. The arrogance of dominant culture is mighty.
Yeah,
it's mighty. But man-hating really came out of the insecurity of dominant culture. They're not used to not being dominant. I had some young men come to a concert up in I don't know if it's Minnesota or somewhere. They came backstage and they said, we have listened to your music as a group. We're a men's group and we come all the time to your concerts and we've really loved it. And we've learned a lot about our own sexism from your songs. But tonight, they said, it seemed as if you've become more and more man-hating. And I said, well, let's take a look at the set list. Which songs do you think were man-hating? And they looked through it and they couldn't see anything. And I said, I'm going to just make a suggestion here. I think it's because for some reason tonight, I chose songs that don't mention you at all. And that you would have rather been criticized as a man than to be not seen at all. And I say this because I think it's true for white people, for whatever, that it's not just you, but you were asked tonight unknowingly to feel okay about not being the center of attention, even the critical center of attention. And their mouths dropped and they, oh my God, we got to go back to the men's group and work on this. They totally got what it was
at least
happening.
They're good listeners.
Yeah. Well, and they were working on it.
Totally.
They were really working on it.
So I know you've talked about labels on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to ask you about being the first out lesbian in People magazine.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that even feel to you? Do you identify as a lesbian? I mean, it seems like you don't, based off of what I've read.
Well, it's very hard because we don't have good language for it. I feel like I am, because of the work I do and have been doing since 1975, if I laid it all out, you would say that my life has been completely woman identified and that my main community of support is the lesbian community. Then there's this little dangling participle out there about who does one sleep with. Well, I haven't been with anybody in almost 20 years. So then where does that put me? Because my self-identification as to whether I'm straight or gay or a lesbian or bisexual, or whatever, it doesn't really have anything to do with sex. It has to do, for me, with my commitment to where I'm working, and that everything, even if I'm working on Gaza or I'm working on racism or I'm working on whatever, it's coming through a window of someone who has been through anti-imperialism, criticism of capitalism, lesbian feminism, anti-racism. Those are all the doors that I've gone through, and I've been educated everywhere, every step along the way. And I have come to whatever it is I am now. I don't know what you call that, and I don't care. But there are other people who feel very insecure about their identity, and they want to know, are you or aren't you? And I think if I were in sexual relationships, I would say my strongest identity would be monogamous. But that's not how people think. And I understand the desire to have people identify, for example, as a lesbian, because there's still such profound oppression. And so we need things all clear. And I don't know how to be clear. I ended up meeting someone many, many years ago, a man, and who had a daughter. And he understood the complexities of my life and offered me a lot of safety and peace when I came home. and helped build a home where I could bring my mother, who was aging, where I could help him take care of his daughter, where it was what I needed. And I don't see it as it being therefore a heterosexual relationship. And I know other people maybe do, but it's just not how I thought about it.
I mean, and so you're saying the relationship itself you didn't think of as heterosexual?
Not really.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need
because I came into it as a lesbian. You know what I mean? It's like, and after we weren't together anymore, he realized that there was a big part of him that was gay.
Oh, wow.
And he's 85, so he decided not to keep acting on that. But we had a lot of gender fluidity. And I also think, and this is because I'm a public person, I think, I vowed that I would never have a relationship with anybody I met after a show because they were coming off of show energy and they had met me as that person on stage. So basically what that meant was, with the exception of 2 women who I had really beautiful relationships with, I didn't meet any of them and they weren't fans. And Pat wasn't a fan. He didn't know my music when we met.
I just want to say that I completely feel in my body what you're talking about with labels. And I mean, I do find peace in sort of trying to figure out how I identify and like understanding myself in that way. But it's so much more complicated than that. And when I first started on this journey of going to all the lesbian bars in the country, a lot of people, young people especially, were not identifying as lesbian. Like I didn't hear that a lot on the road. And then there kind of was this wave after that first year and the first road trip where new lesbian bars were opening. A lot of news was being made about the sort of death of the lesbian bars. And I think young people started taking her history a lot more seriously. The second time we went around to visit the new bars, over and over again, I was hearing young people say that they identified as a lesbian and saying like, I center everyone aside from cis men and I'm a lesbian and I'm proud to be a lesbian and like I'm proud of the history of lesbians and that kind of thing. And I'm like, I feel that. Like I feel like a lesbian even though I also sexually am more sort of fluid than that. And I just really understand that. And I think that the younger generation will completely understand that. And not that you have to identify as a lesbian, but just sort of see you for all of your history and all of that.
Well, when I first was in a relationship with a man after being out as a lesbian, I think people were, lesbians were afraid that I would abandon because they'd seen Hollywood starlets who got found out and outed, who immediately went and got married. I never abandoned. And I think people saw that I was still on the front lines, you know, that I wasn't walking away from that. So I feel in the audience a huge trust now and not so important to them anymore, you know, who I have sex with. People have said to me, I'm really sorry you got sort of beat up by the lesbian community when you were with a man. I said, no. There are a lot of women who came to their political consciousness through coming out. That was their war zone. It was for many, many women, I think continues to be the major political event in their life. That everything they do is through their lesbianism.
Yes.
So when I first came out, there was a member of my extended family that told me many years later that when she first heard that I'd come out as a lesbian, it literally made her sick to her stomach, that she found herself wanting to go into the bathroom or throw up. It was a completely unfamiliar choice to her in the life that she had grown up with. It just wasn't talked about or thought about. And the whole idea, I think, very graphically, her thinking of me, who she loved as a relative, having oral sex with a woman literally made her feel sick.
Wow.
Like, how can you do that? You know?
Okay.
I mean, this might have been also a heterosexual who didn't have oral sex with men either.
Right.
You know?
Sounds like it, maybe.
Who knows? So she told me this many years later, and we're still very good friends and continued to be. But later, when word got out that I'd been in a relationship with a man, a woman told me, like, she said, when I first heard that, it made me so sick to my stomach. I wanted to go into the bathroom and throw up.
Here we go again.
I know.
I mentioned that you were the first out lesbian in People magazine. How did that happen?
Well, I think People magazine had gone to lots of other women in the music, in the entertainment industry, and nobody wanted to come out.
They wanted to have a feature of like this person.
I thought it was time,
Yeah.
you know, it was after Stonewall had already happened. And I think they sort of thought, okay, this is something we want to deal with. So they just worked their way down the list till they found me.
But then, and so what, you like got a phone call and
Yeah.
was it a hard decision to do it?
Not for me, but I was with a woman named Nancy Vogel who had a family that was highly visible and military. And I thought, I better check with her, you know. So she and I talked about it, and she decided, no, let's do this. So
Was she part of it as well?
no, but she was referenced. I think they wanted to know whether it was going to be okay for me to talk about the relationship that I was in. So once Nancy cleared that, then I did.
And what happened once it was
went
published?
in nothing.
Nothing, because you were already so kind of publicly who you were.
Yeah.
Didn't change your life.
Not really. No.
Okay.
My mom.
It's still a great stat, though.
Yeah, it is good, isn't it? When my mom knew it was come out on you know, to be at the cash registers, she just went out that day and walked around. And I said, "What are you doing that for?" She said, "I'm just gonna be there in case anybody has anything to say."
Your parents sound so amazing.
They were pretty cool. Yeah.
Is there anything else, any other message you want to leave people with?
I guess what I want to say is, wow, we get to be here. It's the only planet we know of that has life on it like this, and we're spinning through space at an unimaginable rate of speed. And wow, almost every day I wake up and say, I'm not doing this anymore. Almost every day. You know, and have been doing that since I was a little kid. My mom would drive me to singing lessons when I was 8. And I'd sit in the back seat all in a stump and crying. And I don't want to do it anymore, Mom. And she said, well, you don't have to. Just go in and tell your singing teacher you don't want to do it anymore. But you can't just drop her. You have to go in and say goodbye. It was a lot to ask of a kid, but I did it. And I went in and she'd say, I don't know. I said, let's sing that song we were working on first since you've paid for the lesson. And I'd come out a half hour later dancing and singing and just like so happy. So my sister calls it that I've been driving with the brakes on all my life.
Really? I mean, no one would have ever guessed that about you.
I know.
You just really, I guess the gas pedal is just a lot stronger than those brakes.
Something is, because I get up every day and I do it again, just like I came out of that singing lesson when I was 8. But so that's all is to say is you don't have to feel like it. Do it and then feel later, because otherwise we just procrastinate into our depression or our sadness or our loneliness or our shyness. I think shy people have a really, get over it, you know? Get over it.
Get over your shyness.
Yeah, I mean, you can be shy and walk. I used to have to go and do these fundraising parties before a concert because the organization wanted to make some extra money. And I would walk in there and I'd sort of stand there and there'd be 20, 30 people with their little plates of cheese and their glass of wine. And I just thought, oh, I hate this. I really hate this. And then I got a plan. I said, I'm walking in. I'm going up to every single person. Hi, I'm Holly. Thanks so much for supporting this. Shake their hand. Go to the next person. I worked my way all the way around until I had shaken everybody's hand. And then I said, I got to go do the show. And it just broke through. I still felt shy, but I gave myself a system.
Yeah. What would you say? How should I get over this shyness that I like? Look at this is crazy. Do you want to see how much I'm sweating right now? Not because of you, but I'm speaking at the Women's March. It's my first time doing anything like
and
that.
You're anticipating
I'm
it.
so nervous. I just really.
Well, I'll give you a hint. You're the host, not the guest.
Okay.
You look out at them. Are you all okay? Did you have a fight with your lover? Did you get enough sleep? Have you had enough food? You don't say it. That's just what you're saying to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not about you. It's not about you.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
But good luck.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you.
Gosh. I mean, you're a great person to talk to right before and kind of hype me up.
Shall we go over?
Yes. Thank you to our sponsor, Olivia Travel, the travel company for lesbians and LGBTQ+ women. If you like this episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. It really helps others discover our podcast. Cruising is produced by a small but mighty team of 3 queer women, Rachel Karp, Jen McGinnity, and me, your host and editor, Sarah Gabrielli. Our theme song is by Joey Freeman. You can find us on social media at cruisingpod and on the web at www.cruisingpod.com. Support us at buymeacoffee.com/cruisingpod.
Can you actually change your personality if you want to? How does peer pressure work, and why is it so powerful? Should you ever really trust your gut when you make a big decision? These are just a few of the topics we've recently covered on my podcast, Something You Should Know. I'm the host, Mike Carruthers, and each episode of Something You Should Know covers multiple topics that are likely relevant to you. You'll discover things you can use in your life today, right now, like how to have a great conversation, how to be more courageous, the anatomy of the perfect apology, and much, much more. To date, there are over 1,000 episodes of Something You Should Know, and we've gotten over 4,000 mostly 5-star reviews. I invite you to check out Something You Should Know. Look for the bright yellow light bulb on the blue background. Something You Should Know, wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm Amy Nicholson, the film critic for the LA Times.
And I'm Paul Scheer, an actor, writer, and director. You might know me from The League, Veep, or my non-eligible for Academy Award role in Twisters.
We love movies, and we come at them from different perspectives.
Yeah, like Amy thinks that, Joe Pesci was miscast in Goodfellas, and I don't.
He's too old. Let's not forget that Paul thinks that Dune 2 is overrated.
It is.
Anyway, despite this, we come together to host Unspooled, a podcast where we talk about good movies, critical hits,
fan favorites, must-sees, and in case you missed them.
We're talking Parasite to Home Alone.
From Grease to The Dark Knight.
We've done deep dives on popcorn flicks. We've talked about why Independence Day deserves a second look.
And we've talked about horror movies, some that you've never even heard of, like Ganja and Hess.
So if you love movies like we do, come along on our cinematic adventure.
Listen to Unspooled wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to hit the follow button.